All right, so are you ready to dive into something kind of huge?
Always.
This court case we're looking at today, it's not just another tech giant showdown. This one could actually change how we get apps on our phones. We're talking about Epic Games.
Okay.
You know, those Fortnite people
Right.
taking on Google over the Play Store.
Hmm.
And the court's decision, well, let's just say it sent shockwaves through the whole tech world.
Hmm.
We've got 3 articles here to unpack today. One from The Register, another from Al Jazeera,
Okay.
and we even found one from Google itself, their own kind of take on the ruling.
Yeah.
So we're going to break it all down, look at every angle, and, try to see what it all might mean for us, as people who use Android phones.
Sounds good.
Okay, so just to set the scene, Epic Games, they sued Google, claiming they have a monopoly on Android app distribution and those in-app payments through their Play Store.
Hmm.
I mean, you've probably already got some thoughts on that. But the really interesting thing is that the jury, they actually agreed with Epic. They said Google's practices, what they're doing, it violates antitrust laws.
Right. And, those laws exist for a reason. They're there to, prevent any one company from getting too big, too powerful. That way they can't stifle competition, which ultimately it hurts us, the consumers.
Yeah, totally makes sense. It's you don't want just one supermarket in town, right? You want options, competition, better prices.
Exactly. And Judge Donato, in this case, he didn't just say, Google, be a little nicer. He issued some serious orders. And this is where things get really interesting for you listening. So, for example, Google can't force developers to use their Play Store payment system anymore.
Oh, wow.
This opens the door for developers to offer other ways to pay, potentially with lower fees.
So instead of being stuck with Google Pay, you might see options for PayPal, Venmo, maybe even cryptocurrency down the line.
It's possible.
Who knows?
Right. And if developers aren't paying Google those fees, we might see some of those savings, passed on to us, like cheaper apps, cheaper in-app purchases.
Okay, now that's the kind of impact I can get behind.
Right.
But hold on, it gets even juicier. The ruling also says Google has to let users download apps from other stores, not just the Play Store.
Wow.
This is huge, right? It's like suddenly being able to buy books from any bookstore, not just Amazon.
It is a significant shift. Now, whether it actually, plays out that way in practice remains to be seen. Google is obviously not thrilled about this, and they're already appealing the ruling.
Yeah, figures.
They're arguing this could lead to a free-for-all of security risks, shady app stores popping up, potentially exposing your data to malware or scams.
Yeah, no, I get that. I can see where they're coming from. The Play Store does have those, those safety checks in place. But I don't know, isn't that a problem for those other app stores to figure out? I mean, if they want to compete, they'll need to up their security game, right?
That's the ideal scenario. But it does raise questions about that transition period,
Yeah.
Will we see a rise in Android malware before things settle down? It's something to watch closely, for sure. There are valid concerns there. But before we, dive into Google's full response, there's another interesting detail about this whole case. Epic Games actually tried the same thing with Apple a while back, suing them over the App Store.
Oh, right.
And they lost.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. So what happened? Why'd Epic win against Google but not Apple?
It comes down to a really fundamental difference in how Android and iOS operate. So Apple's iOS, it's what's called a closed ecosystem, meaning they control everything very tightly. You can only get apps through their App Store, period. Android, on the other hand, allows something called sideloading, which basically means you can install apps from anywhere, even directly from a developer's website.
So it's like the difference between a carefully curated garden and a wild, sprawling forest.
Exactly. And that difference right there, it's a key point of contention in this whole case. Is Google abusing its power in this more open Android world? Or are they simply playing by a different set of rules because Android allows for more flexibility in the first place? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
These are the questions the courts are grappling with.
Okay, so we've talked about how this ruling could mean more payment options, maybe even lower prices for apps, which, I mean, that's pretty exciting. But I also kind of want to dig a bit deeper into this whole multiple app store thing. Isn't the Play Store kind of like a well-organized library? You go there knowing you'll find what you need, everything's categorized, they've got the recommendation system and everything.
That's a great analogy, actually. It gets to the heart of another one of Google's arguments.
Yeah.
They're saying that, suddenly allowing apps from anywhere, it could actually make it harder to find the good stuff.
Really? Wait, how?
Well, Google, they invest a lot in their algorithms. All those like behind-the-scenes systems that determine what apps show up first in your search results
Yeah.
or get featured in those like recommended for you sections. They use things like your past downloads, user reviews, even things like trending topics to figure out what apps you might actually like.
So it's kind of like how Netflix figures out what shows to recommend, but for apps.
Exactly. And Google's argument is that if developers are all scattered across a bunch of different app stores with their own different standards and algorithms and everything, it could become, way harder for users to actually find the best apps. It might even give an unfair advantage to those, bigger, more established developers, the ones who already have a big following. You know what I mean?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about the discoverability part of it. So it's kind of a trade-off then, right? More freedom, maybe lower prices, but maybe at the cost of a more chaotic, app browsing experience.
Precisely. And it's a complex trade-off. There are no easy answers. But there's one more argument from Google that I think we need to address. They're actually claiming that this ruling, even though it's supposed to be about making things more competitive, that it could actually have the opposite effect.
What?
Yeah. That it could actually reduce competition, especially compared to Apple.
Hold on. I'm trying to wrap my head around that for a second. How could making Android more open end up making it less competitive?
It comes back to that whole, difference in ecosystems we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
See, Apple's iOS, it's a closed system. They control everything very, very tightly.
Right.
They set the rules, they take their cut, and developers, they just kind of have to play ball if they want access to all the iPhone users. Google's point is that by, kind of forcing them to make Android even more open, while Apple gets to keep their nice little walled garden, creates this uneven playing field.
So Google's saying they'll have to play by a different set of rules than Apple.
Exactly. And that, they're arguing, could ultimately hurt Android's ability to compete with Apple in the long run. They're claiming this ruling could stifle innovation and make it harder for them to invest in things that are actually good for us, like security and user experience.
So they're not just worried about losing some control over the Play Store. They're worried about the bigger picture of how Android stacks up against iOS.
Precisely. And look, it's a complex legal argument. Whether or not it holds water is up to the courts to decide. But it is a good reminder that there are always multiple perspectives to consider in a case like this.
For sure. But before we get totally lost in the weeds here, I kind of want to bring this back to, our listeners. What does this ruling, if it even survives all the appeals and everything, actually mean for the, average person using an Android phone? Are we going to see these changes overnight? That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Are we going to wake up tomorrow and our Android phones are just totally different?
Probably not overnight, no. This isn't flipping a switch,
Right.
Even if Google's appeal, totally fails. The injunction doesn't fully kick in until November 1st. And even then, some of the bigger changes, like letting those other app stores get access to, Google Play's catalog and everything, that could take months to actually implement, get the technical details sorted out.
Okay, so no, immediate Android revolution. But let's say down the line, all these changes actually, happen, become the new normal. What might we see on our phones, in real life? Give me the concrete details.
Okay, well, one of the first things you might notice is more payment options. Like when you're buying an app or you're doing some, in-app purchases,
Right.
instead of it always going through Google Play billing,
Right.
you might start seeing those options to pay directly with a credit card, PayPal, or even something like, cryptocurrency.
Now that you mention it, I have seen a couple apps experimenting with those alternative payment methods recently.
Right, exactly. And this ruling, this could really open the floodgates. And remember those lower fees for developers we were talking about?
Yeah.
Some of those savings, they could actually get passed along to you in the form of lower app prices.
Okay, now we're talking. Lower app prices, that would definitely make me hit that download button a lot more often, I'll tell you that much. What about the actual app stores themselves? Will I suddenly have to juggle a million different stores to find the apps I actually want?
You might start seeing more options, yeah. Think about it though, some developers, they might prefer to distribute their apps independently or through some of those rival app stores out there.
Right.
Especially those who, maybe haven't always loved Google's policies in the past.
Right, yeah.
You might even see the phone manufacturers themselves, like a Samsung, who already have their own app store, by the way, pushing theirs more aggressively.
Interesting. So instead of one giant app store, we might end up with like a more diverse landscape, kind of like how we get our music from, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, all those different sources.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. It's not that, Google Play is going to like vanish overnight. It's got a massive user base, tons of brand recognition. They're not going anywhere. It'll
Mhm.
probably still be the dominant player for a while. But having more options, even if they're a little, rough around the edges at first, could be really good for us, for consumers in the long run. It could spark more innovation, better pricing, more choices in how you experience the Android ecosystem.
Yeah, it's like anything else, a little healthy competition can really like shake things up for the better.
Exactly. And that brings us to, I think, maybe the biggest takeaway from all of this.
Yeah.
This case, I mean, regardless of what the final outcome ends up being, who wins, who loses, it really forces us to think differently about the technology we use every single day.
Yeah.
We often just take it for granted that there's like only one way to do things, one app store, one payment system.
Right.
This case reminds us that, it's not set in stone.
It's like realizing that even the internet, this like vast, crazy network of information, has an operating system, and that operating system can change and evolve.
Exactly. And as you're, coming across news and opinions about all this stuff in
Yeah.
the coming weeks and months, just, remember to stay curious. Ask questions.
Mhm.
Don't just accept whatever the headlines are saying as, like the be-all and end-all. Think about, who actually benefits from this change. What are the downsides that nobody's talking about? Just, engage with the complexity of it all.
Yeah, because there are always different sides to every story. And the more informed we are as, like users, the better decisions we can make.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. Okay, now that we've dug into how this whole like app ecosystem actually works.
Right.
What are your thoughts on, the balance of power between those tech giants, the Googles of the world, and us, the everyday users, just trying to, use our phones and live our lives?
Yeah.
Is this court ruling a step in the right direction? Does it create more problems than it solves? We want to hear what you think. We'll leave that for you to ponder. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.